Okay, we're live.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on. I want you to introduce yourself. We have Libby Triolo on today with LibbyTrioloCoaching.com. And we're just going to talk about spheres of control. That's today's topic. And, I want you to introduce yourself. And I think it's important to talk about, your background in athletics and sports and kind of your journey, and then get into the discussion for today.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm Libby Triolo. I am a licensed therapist and a mindset mental performance coach for athletes. I grew up playing sports, competitive sports, anything my parents would let me sign up for, basically, as I wanted to play. But I was a competitive soccer player for like 10 years. And looking back, I realized how much I struggled with the mental game and how much of an impact that had on me pursuing opportunities after high school and into college. So I went to school, got a degree in psychology, went on and got a master's in clinical counseling, started working with kids, teens, young adults in a lot of different settings, schools, and then finally made my way to private practice. And then along the line, I've realized that I really like working with kids, teens, young adults, and especially athletes. There's just something great about connecting this content and these mindset skills through the athletic lens, because that's something kids are already passionate about, so you get a lot of buy-in. So that's kind of how I got here. I'm a billet mom for the Colorado Grit, so I have two, hockey players living in my basement, and we get into a lot of this stuff at the dinner table, so it's nice to be, around athletes all the time.
Yep. I think the junior age is when it starts to really come to the forefront how important the mental side is, especially with junior hockey being unique to other sports. I mean, you have JUCO for other sports, but you don't really have a set junior hockey, let's say, or junior program for, years after high school before you get into college. And, the pyramid, as they talk about in sports, gets really small as you start climbing the ranks. And, you either start to see your dreams become more in reach or become more out of reach. But, it can be, mentally, taxing. And, that's kind of, why I'm excited to talk about this topic today, and, spheres of control. And you always hear about control what you can control, but what exactly does that mean? How can, our
How do you do
goal,
that in
yeah,
practice?
exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm a firm believer that the mental game is the most important part of the athletic world, and in, I think life too, but
Sure.
that's another rabbit hole. But I just think
Yeah.
that it can really catapult somebody, because everyone has skill development coaches in all your sports. Everyone's, there are some gifts athletically that other people have that some don't, maybe, let's say, but regardless, you have proper training all over the place. Now, it's widely accessible, but the mental side, I think, is something that could help kids like power through and, self-actualize kind of some things that they have set for themselves. So, if we want to kind of dive into spheres of control, and you have a little bit of a presentation that you're going to give too, which is awesome. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I think you hit on such a great point that the mental game is so needed, right? We need training in these things, but there's not a lot of accessibility to a certain degree, right? Like
Yep.
people don't prioritize it as much as maybe they should. I talk to a lot of parents who are like, oh, I'm just going to get them more on ice sessions with a private coach. And I'm like, that's great. But like, if we could actually figure out what's going on between their ears, you can maximize what you're going to get out of those lessons, what they're going to get out of regular practice. So I think we are always looking for ways to control the situation, but controlling it in the right way is what we want to look at. So I'm going to share my screen, and we'll kind of get into spheres of control, and we can talk about how you can implement this starting today, really. So a big thing for athletes that I like to look at here is we have to understand where different elements of our lives and our sport and our day-to-day fall in our sphere of control. So these are the spheres of influence. So you have your sphere of control at the heart, at the center. It's the smallest. And then you have your sphere of influence and your sphere of concern. So for a lot of athletes, you have to understand that your sphere of control is the smallest, but it can actually be the most impactful, right? This holds all the things that you can directly control. And the list is really small, right? So yourself, your focus, your choices, your behavior, your attitude, your work ethic, where you prioritize your time, your dedication, right? Those are the things you actually have control over. And then there's the sphere of influence. So this holds everything where you can impact an outcome or a relationship, but you don't have full control over it. So I like to think of this area as anywhere you interact with other people, right? So team dynamics, relationships with your parents, your coaches, your friends, teammates, interactions on the ice with opponents and refs, right? Like you impact and influence those outcomes, but you don't have full and direct control. And then there's your sphere of concern. So this is the biggest, and this is actually where most players waste a lot of energy and resource worrying about things in this sphere. So this is anything that might concern you or interest you, but is not fully in your area of control. So coaching decisions, roster spots, ice time, the style of coach you have, organizational decisions, teammates' choices, ref behavior, opponent behavior, ice conditions, right? All of those things that influence how we perform, but we don't have control over. So I'm sure you see this a lot with kids pre-game, right? They really get in their head, well, what about this? And what if we're playing this team? And what if this happens? And, my ice time is low. So, how am I going to be impactful if I'm only getting 6 minutes or whatever it might be, right? And so we have a lot of athletes that get really stuck in the sphere of concern. And that derails their ability to make growth and improve their performance because they're focused on the wrong things. Go ahead.
No, I completely agree. And this is something that happened to me multiple times. And then it becomes a distraction. And then it becomes a distraction from what you should be focusing on, which is the actionable steps you could take every day to get through it, right? Or become a better player or, find a new way to contribute. Like it's going to always happen. There's going to be times where you're not going to play as much at every single level. So
Absolutely.
It does not matter what do you have to fall back on? And that's kind of like that center, correct? That center of the dot, which is your effort, your attitude, controlling your emotions and doing the actual process of getting better. But I think a lot of athletes, I'm going to agree with you on this 100%, is that they get so caught up in the external stuff that has no impact on their actions to make the situation better. And if they don't learn how to get out of that headspace and focus on, okay, this is going to happen, what do I do now to make the situation better? You're going to always get stuck, and that's how, you get caught in like the ruts of a season and having a bad season or having a bad 2 months of a season. So
yeah, it's a slippery slope, right? If I'm concerned about these things, if I'm worried about, ice time, and then I get on the ice and I don't do anything with the time I'm given, right? Because I'm so concerned about getting so little, or I'm so concerned about making a mistake, you're not going to improve your ice time. You're not giving your coach a reason to give you more, right? And so you have to suck it back in, right? You have to zoom it back into what you can control. Again, problems are solvable, but when we focus on the wrong things, we stir up a lot of anxiety, we stir up a lot of frustration and overwhelm. And once you can kind of release that outcome and say, okay, the chips are going to fall where they may, right? I could have a coach that, plays favorites potentially. That happens everywhere. That happens in every sport. That happens at every level, right? And so I could have that happen. And if I worry and am concerned about that, then I'm not focusing in on improving my technique or working my butt off, right, on the ice, because I'm so concerned about that outcome that we don't ever focus in on the actual thing. So I always say zoom it back in. What can I do to control the uncontrollable? Because that's what anxiety is. I'm trying to control the things I can't control.
And it's like sorry to interrupt you, but I'm just question on that.
Sure.
Isn't it basically just I've heard this kind of a lot recently about, the term anxiety, and it's
Yeah.
like, it's worry about the absence of your action, correct? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're developing this feeling because you know that there's something that you should be doing
Mm-hmm.
to either get yourself out of the situation or make something better. And
Right.
and now you're just making that feeling grow as the less you do, the less you act, the less you take action on making it better. And then that's why you have like these kind of overwhelming feelings of it. And that's how it grows. Is that correct? Would you agree with that, or
Yeah,
am I
think
kind
it
of
becomes
off?
this like analysis paralysis, right? If
Yeah.
I'm looking at all of these angles and I'm trying to think through every scenario, then I end up doing nothing because it becomes so overwhelming, right? Everything becomes so big and scary and just like, oh my God, what if I pick the wrong thing or I do the wrong thing, so I do nothing?
Correct. Yep.
And that's not getting you where you want to go either, right? And so I think it's like solving any problem. I always tell my athletes this, right? If you're anxious or worried about something, right, sit down and literally just write down, dump out everything that you're worried about. Whatever comes to mind for like 3 to 5 minutes, just write it down. And then when you can see it out on paper, right, like our brains become like wormholes. We just like burrow into stuff and we get really lost and we can have a lot of thoughts all at once, right? If we sit down and write it down, we actually slow ourselves down because you can't write as fast as you can think. So you write it all down and then you look at it and you sort that list into out of my control, in my control, right? If it's out of my control and it feels really overwhelming, is there any element to that I can impact, right? Can I hone in on something I can control, right? If my coach says to me, you know what, I feel like your conditioning is poor and you're not game ready, okay, there's something I can do about that. Whether he
Correct.
decides to give me more ice time because of my effort, I can't control that. But what I can control is I can bring it back to, okay, I'm going to implement a conditioning program. I'm going to tap my teammate who is in really good shape, like whatever it might be, right? So even if it's the outcome is out of my control, there are elements that are in my control. So I can start to make a plan to address those. And that helps you kind of like, you have to have this like solution focused mindset that all problems have a solution, right? Whether the solution has to be like, I just have to let that go. I can't think and worry about that because I can't do anything to control it. There's going to be a lot of stuff that happens in life that you can't control, that you can't prepare for, right? And so a lot of times, not just athletes, but just humans in general, get so caught up in making it worse for themselves because of how they respond to whatever the situation or stimulus is, right? We judge ourselves for not feeling a certain way or for feeling a certain way. And then we spiral out of like, well, what if I did this? And what if I had done this differently? You can't change any of that, right? And oftentimes we can make our problems bigger than they need to be because we get so caught in this sphere of concern. Bring it back to what can I do? What can I control?
Yep. No, I agree. It's I think I heard this quote not too long ago, and I say it a lot to the kids that I work with. It's when you're receiving feedback, take it professionally, not personally. Like you're in the athletic world, you're in the athletic space, and if you want to be elite or if you want to be really good at this and achieve your goals, you're gonna have to receive feedback and you're gonna have to take it and okay, now what do I do with this? Instead of having it affect you personally, take it as feedback on this is what I need to work on. I now am gonna, like you said, implement, more conditioning into whatever it is that I'm doing, a couple times a week or every day, whatever it is. Stay out on the ice or the court and do an extra 5 minutes of sprints, whatever that is. But if you take it and all of a sudden be like, oh, like, I don't know how to really phrase it, I guess, but not like poor me, but like if you kind of have that mentality of like, oh, he's coming after me, like he's your coach. He kind of has to, and maybe he says it one way to some player and another way to you, and you don't like how he said it to you, but you wish he said it. It doesn't matter. Just what did he say? Go through it. Like, don't listen to how he says it. Listen to what he or she is saying and telling you, and say, okay, this is direct feedback. I need to work on this because you're going to have coaches that say things the way you want them to and the way you don't. But if you're able to adapt and just see that as the feedback that you need to excel and get to where you want to go, you're going to be great as it gets to the higher levels because college, pro and beyond, it's relatively cutthroat. You know what I mean? And if you're not performing, you're done, and you're either sitting or you're getting told to go to a different team. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, it's just, building that mental toughness to be like, okay, this is where, I need to improve, and because, I don't want to see kids kind of like get so down on themselves. Like, hey, relax. We're not coming at you. We're just trying to help you,
Yeah, I say that this is something that came up. I was on a different live with another company, and they were saying how, what should you do if a coach comes to you and you keep getting this negative feedback? I don't like the word negative, but we'll go with it because that's what they said. You keep getting this specific negative feedback from your coach, right? How do you emotionally respond to that? And my biggest thing is always what's the content of what they're saying, right? So after, say you have a player meeting with a coach, and I'm big on writing stuff down because I think like things can get lost in our minds a lot. But if you're having a meeting with your coach, I always say either write it down right after, or if your coach is cool with it, like bring a notebook and write down what they're actually saying to you, right? Like, what do you want from me, right? This is what I hear you're saying. I'm hearing you say that I, am weak on my forecheck. You want me to be more aggressive, whatever it is, right? Like, what is the actual feedback you're getting? Don't take it personally, and make sure you're understanding what exactly they're saying to you, versus, because typically when we're feeling like something feels negative or harsh, we shut down. We stop listening, right? We're now in our emotional response of like, oh, my coach is picking on me, or they don't like me, or whatever. It's like, no, exactly what you're saying. I'm not saying this to you because I don't like you. I'm saying this to you because I need you to do a specific job on this team. Here's what I need you to do.
Correct.
Right? And so I think we get really, like you said, we take things really personally. And that's such a growth area for like every person. Like,
correct.
I think everybody struggles with that, but I think you're right. I think it also plays into this not to sound harsh, but like this victim mentality that
totally
we have as like a society, right?
Yep.
Like, I don't want to take personal accountability. This is the excuse why this and this happened, and it's like, I just own it, right? Like, if you did something, own it. Or if someone needs something different from you, they're telling you this because they want you to succeed, right? But like, so much of what we do is we internalize and we take it personally, and then I'm the victim because my coach is, an a-hole or whatever, like whatever it is. It's like we get kind of like caught up in that, and it's like, it's, I don't think it's that deep.
No, I was guilty of it a lot.
I was horrible at this as a youth athlete. Like, awful. I took stuff so personally.
No, and I just want to, like, to my younger self, be like, dude, you're in the performance world. Like, you're playing hockey, you're trying to play at a high level, and then now you're like getting butthurt when things aren't maybe going your way. And like, I worked so hard. Yeah, you worked so hard. So did everyone else, dude. Like, you got to step it up a notch. And it's just building that, I guess, that tough skin, that shell to like understand that this is feedback and it's not going to be served to you how you want it. And sometimes that's okay. Sometimes you have to just look and see, okay, how do I, make the situation better? And look within. Challenge yourself to look within, to make yourself, a better athlete. So you be so good that they can't deny you, essentially. Which
give them a reason to give you more, right?
Correct.
Like, to trust you, to give you more ice time, to put you on power play, like, give them a reason.
Correct.
That people would look and be like, why isn't this kid doing this, right? Like,
correct. Yeah.
You have to give them that reason. And I will preface, there probably are times when coaches are personal, right? Maybe they don't like a kid and whatever. That happens for sure. But I think in general, you go out there and prove them wrong, right? Like, at the end of the day, like, if you feel like what you're prepping is legit and you think you deserve more, then keep working. right?
I completely, and the coaches have a job too, and the coaches, if they don't, they have to put the best players in the ice so they can keep their job. So the coach may not like you, but if you're so good that you're just performing and being
their hands
undeniable,
are tied,
they have exactly. And I do want to kind of go into some things that you teach with your athletes as far as like spheres of control. Like, what is your approach if an athlete comes in and we have like some listener questions that we can dive into in a bit, but like, I guess one of my questions too is you go in and say, okay, let's focus on the center, right? Which is your effort, your attitude, those type of things. And do you dive into like specific, would that be under specifics? Would you tell them specifics to like, would there be an exercise involving, okay, effort? Like, can you make your effort better? Great. What underneath effort are some process tasks that you can do? Like, I got to recognize that my shot isn't that great, so now I need to shoot X amount of pucks every single day, or my conditioning isn't where it needs to be. I need to do, like, is that how you break it down from that center? And I'll let you obviously speak for how you do things, but I'm curious, like, your process with working with athletes and regarding this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. So my big thing is that you have to always connect it back to your why. Why are you here, right?
Okay.
So what is your why, your overarching why for your athletic career, right? What are your big dreams and aspirations? But those, for most people, aren't like, you're not going to the NHL tomorrow, right? Like, if you're 16, that's not happening for most athletes, right? So creating that roadmap, right? We always talk about goal setting. So the ultimate goal, the ultimate sphere of control is creating a plan and sticking to it, right? Being consistent with how you show up with your habits. So I always have athletes come in, they tell me their why, and then we work backwards. Okay, so what is your goal for the next 5 years, 3 years, 1 year, this season, right? Like, let's bring it back and create plans for that. And that requires you, like you said, right? If my shot's not great or accurate, or my conditioning's bad, or, you know, my positioning is not great, like, always you have to take a reflective lens, right? We can all think back to our athletic careers and like those pieces of constructive criticism we got from coaches. Like, I can think about mine now. I'm like, oh man, like, I was, you know, there were times when I feared mistakes, so I played too timid, right? Like, I didn't play to my full potential. Like, you can think about those things, and a lot of the times we don't want to take responsibility for that. So you have to have like a self-aware, critical lens. And that's one of the big skills I build with athletes, because emotionally intelligent athletes are successful athletes, right? They're able to be self-aware. They're able to reflect on what's going well, what's not going well. They're able to communicate effectively with their teammates, with their coaches, with anybody on the staff or in general. They're able to regulate their emotions, and they're able to like process and release them. That's what we want. So a specific activity would be to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to goal set, right? I'm going to break it down into an action plan, and I'm going to really look like where I want to be and what I'm missing that I need to do to get where I want to be. And like for kids, right, they're going to need help with this to a certain degree, right? Like, you talk about youth athletes, you might need to tap your parents, or you might need to tap a coach, right? Like, hey, coach, what is something that you think, you know, this is my goal for the season. What do you think I'm missing, or what do you think I need to focus on, right? Like, use your resources. You don't have to do this by yourself. You shouldn't do it by yourself.
No, correct.
Right?
Asking questions, like, take ownership for your development and ask, you know, coaches love that. You know, coaches want to be asked, so that way they could, you know, they want to help. That's why they do what they do. And, you know, it shows that you care about your process as well. And I love that you brought up, you know, being emotionally intelligent and kind of like how you dove into being emotionally intelligent, because, you know, you hear that word get dropped and what is it? So, you know, I'm happy that you were able to kind of dive into that. And, you know, a lot of the best athletes, I'm sure, as you see, like, they're emotionally, they're here, like, they're right in the middle. They don't get too high, here, don't get too, so, that's keeping your emotions in check. And sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you on what you were saying, but just wanted to chime in on that.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest thing with emotional intelligence, right, and why elite athletes live in this kind of neutral zone is because they understand two things. They understand that no emotional state is permanent. None of them. The highs, the lows, it doesn't last forever, right? I tell this to my athletes all the time. The elation and excitement after a win fades. Process has to start again tomorrow. It doesn't matter, right? And the crushing, sadness or disappointment from a defeat, same thing. That's not going to last forever either, right? The process has to start again. So elite athletes, that's why they can live in this kind of even neutral playing field, because they know that they're in it for the process, right? Yes, do we like to win? Do we, like to win championships? Do we like to, be the MVP? Like, we want those things. If you're pursuing a goal and you want excellence, like, you want that, right? But so many elite athletes are in it for the process. They love what they're doing every day that builds to winning games in the season, that builds to making the playoffs or whatever it is. Yep. And the other thing they understand is that failure isn't real.
Go into that more,
okay,
if you can.
So,
because I'm actually curious.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the only way that you truly fail, right? If you start to change how you relate to failure, the only way you truly fail is if you quit, right? Like, I can be in the pursuit of a goal, and there's going to be times, because so much of our outcomes are outside of our control, right? You could play the game of your life, and your team could still lose. You could also play a crap game. Your team could still win, right? So there are different, when you change that relation to failure, when you see failure as, something happens on Monday and you don't show up on Tuesday, that's the only time you actually fail, right? So they understand that. They understand that they fail all the time. They get trusted with pivotal moments in games, and they don't execute. They get that, their team has aspirations of winning the Stanley Cup or the NBA Finals or whatever it is, right? And they don't make it, right? Only one team wins every year, but nobody can be like, oh, every team in the NHL had a failing season. It's not what you're not going to say that to elite athletes. I'm a huge Kobe Bryant fan. I think his mental game was insane, like absolute GOAT when it comes to the mental game. He just got it. And he won, what did he win? 5 NBA championships, but he played 20 seasons in the NBA. So nobody's going to be like, oh, Kobe Bryant was a failure because he only won 5 out of 20, right? So the relation to failure has to be different. What do you think about failure? Like, how does that show up for you?
I don't know. I think where my brain directly goes is, if I'm in a skill session, like, I'm trying to think back to when I was playing hockey. Like, if I was in a skill session, I was working on a specific shot, right? Or working on something, and I fall or miss the net, whatever. To me, that's a failure. You know what I mean? I'm pretty critical of myself too, as well, which I think is a blessing and a curse. But I also go in the direction sometimes where I get really, like, hard on myself and I just kind of do nothing, And I think I've been better at that with things. But, if I don't, make a team, failure. If I am working on something and I'm not getting it, failure. If I have an overly emotional response to something, that's a failure. And especially when I try and, like, compare myself, which also you shouldn't do, but naturally you do. Like, when I compare myself to, like, what my goals were, if I want to be here and I feel like I'm not there yet by, especially with hockey, it's pretty measurable. Like, you should be in college from 18 to 25, or you should be at X level and at a certain level at a certain age to achieve and stay on the trajectory of, future goals. And I would kind of see myself in certain spots being like, I'm kind of a failure right now. And that's how it would feel to me. You know what I mean? And I don't know, like, would you agree with that, or what's kind of, like, how does that stack up? I mean, I feel like that's relatively normal though for athletes.
It's so normal. It's so normal.
Yeah.
Everything you're describing is so normal. I think what the difference is, right? Like when I say failure isn't real, it's the relation you have to failure, right? There is truly only one failure is quitting. But I hear what you're saying. I 100% hear what you're saying, because I was that way to myself as an athlete too, right? Like I think where this gets tricky for a lot of kids is that if I see that as a failure, and then what you said, right, then there were times where I just got so worked up about it or like down on myself that I did nothing. Mm-hmm. So that viewpoint of seeing that as a failure hurt you more than it helped you.
100%.
Right? And so having high expectations is not the same as calling yourself a failure. I can have high expectations of myself. We want that, right? We want that. We also have to understand that there's going to be times where I fall short of that. And my viewpoint has to be, okay, how do I learn and how do I grow from this? Versus you're a failure and you suck and like getting so down on yourself, right? Like failure is not bad. People fail all the time. It's what you do when you fail. What do you learn from it? What are you getting to go forward from that? Mm-hmm. Because that, I think, really goes into self-talk for athletes, right? So if my viewpoint of, I missed a shot on the ice, or I'm trying to execute a specific technique or drill and I'm not getting it, right? If my thing is, well, I'm a failure, that was a failure, what is the next thought that comes through your head?
Oh, it's probably like something along the lines of, maybe not this specific, but something along the lines of like, I suck, or like, I'm not good right now, or I'm not good at this. Like, again, like like you talked about that negative self-talk. I start going down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a cycle.
That's
yeah.
Literally every athlete I talk to. So you're not alone in that. That was me too. And that's how you get into a slump, right? That kind of level of thinking. So it's, like I said, it's changing your relation to failure, because failure is going to happen. Right?
It's a total mindset shift. Like, just shift it. No, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. Like, it's good. I made a mistake. I didn't do this correctly. I'm going to keep going.
Now I know how to not do it.
Exactly. Right? Like,
don't do that again.
it's just a shift in your mindset. Would you agree? Just developing a different perspective, and it takes time. It takes reps, but you can do it.
Yes, you absolutely can do it. And like, I think a big part of this, right? Like, just even my journey as an athlete into what I do now, who I was as a person then to now, like, I was highly critical of myself. I was highly anxious. I was that, right? Like, if something went wrong, it just like tanked, like went down from there, because my self-talk and my anxiety were so high. I feel like I look back on that now, and because I've kind of been through this, I mean, I got a little bit of a leg up. I went to college for like 7 years for this stuff. So like, but like changing that mindset of like, you know what, I can't control everything. What can I control? And failure is just figuring out how to not do something, right? I'm going to figure out how to actually do it, how to actually succeed, whether it's sports, school, business, whatever it is, right? Like, people who have the mentality that failure is this big reflection of me, that I think is the mindset shift. If I fail at this one thing, then I myself am a failure. You have to create distance between that. You're going to fail at a lot of stuff. Like, all the time. You're going to fail.
Forever. Yeah.
Forever. Until you are no longer here, right? Like, you are going to fail forever. You're going to fail more than you succeed. A lot of the time. Right? And I think that's where elite athletes get really stuck, is because they're used to being the best, right?
Yep.
They're used to being the guy or the girl, and
they're
they're used to that. And then they get to a certain level where all the guys and the girls have now condensed into one place. Mm-hmm. That's what I see a lot in junior hockey, right? Yep. And then now my identity, I'm no longer the guy. What does that mean? Does that mean I'm horrible at hockey? Should I just quit? Like, you have to shift that mindset to this failure on ice, off ice, whatever, isn't a reflection of me as a person, right? The identity hit and the connection between my identity as a person and my identity as a hockey player is the problem.
Going off that, is that, would you say that this is kind of where like mental toughness ties in? Like,
Oh, yeah.
Is that being meant, I think it is, but you've obviously been studying this and this is what you do. But from what I've learned, it's like, that's what mental toughness is. It's seeing yourself in a situation that you don't like, seeing yourself getting feedback that you don't like, and being mentally tough enough to say to yourself, because it's you versus you. I do like that.
I love that. Yeah.
Saying it into your brain, you're watching your thoughts develop. You're watching the conversation go on in your head. It's like saying, no, like, we're not going to do that. We're not going to go down the victim mentality rabbit hole. We're going to stop it here. I got feedback. I don't like it. I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to change it. Would you deem that as under like the umbrella of like the mental toughness side? Is that what being mentally tough is not allowing yourself to kind of dip into that mindset of...
I think that being mentally tough means that you embrace being uncomfortable. Because to be able to say, right, like, I'm getting this feedback, I'm not going to take it personally. Or I was trusted with a penalty shot and I missed, right? We lost, right? I think that that's saying to myself, like, I can be uncomfortable with that. Those emotions are uncomfortable. And instead of making excuses or instead of, blaming it on this, that, and the other thing, like, I think mentally tough people are people who embrace feeling uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good, right? To look in the mirror and be like, yeah, I totally messed that up. Like, that doesn't feel good. We don't like to not feel good. We live in a world designed to keep us in comfort, right? Like, so I think being mentally tough is embracing the uncomfortable, right? Looking at the hard truths about what you need to do as a person or as an athlete to get where you want to go, looking at your deficits or areas for growth and fully accepting and acknowledging that and making a plan to address it. That's what being mentally tough to me. Mentally toughness, I think, gets this, like, I have a big beef with this in the athletic world, but like the idea of mental toughness as like stoicism, or that nothing bothers you, or that you just grin and bear it. Like, there are absolutely times where you push through, right? You just put on the skates and you just go, right? But there is a level of like, that is not emotional intelligence to deny what you're feeling. Like, the repression, the denial of what you're feeling isn't mentally tough. It's the embracing that uncomfortable and understanding what you need to do and what this says about you. So, for example, a good example of this is like, if you are getting a lot of negative feedback from a coach, right? And we're talking about how a lot of athletes take that personally, right? And so a lot of the response is defensiveness. Well, I do that. I don't know what he's talking about. Or like, that's stupid. Like, that's not how we should play the game, or that's not how we should, whatever, right? Like, there's a lot of defensiveness because I don't want to feel uncomfortable acknowledging that he's probably right, right? Like, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, because if he's right and I struggle with this, can I reach my goals? Right? Like, if I struggle with it, like, we don't go to that solution focused place. We go to, I need to protect my ego place. Right? And so a lot of people will say, like, mental toughness is just like, well, just don't feel anything. Don't say anything. Just like, go out there and do whatever it is you need to do. And that, to me, is not embracing being comfortable. I think that creates a lot of problems for athletes down the road. Because they don't know how to manage those emotions. Like, unexpressed emotion, I'm not saying you have to go and tell everybody how you feel and you've got to be an open book. That's not what I'm saying. But if you don't allow yourself to experience emotion and then process and release emotion, those emotions come out in really ugly and inappropriate ways, right? Like at times you don't want them to come out towards people you don't want them to come out towards. So, you know, being mentally tough is embracing feeling uncomfortable and taking a good hard look and having accountability to say, all right, yeah, that's something I probably could work on. How am I going to address that? And vulnerability is a huge part of mental toughness that I think gets completely overlooked, because that's when you tap a coach and say, hey, you know, maybe your head coach tells you something, right? Like, hey, this is what gives you some feedback. And you're like, man, I'm not exactly sure what he means by that, or I'm not exactly sure how I could improve that. Go talk to an assistant or a skills coach and say, hey, so-and-so told me this, but I'm having a hard time connecting that to my game. Can you help me? Right? Like, that requires a level of vulnerability that is hard for most people, not just athletes, but it's really difficult for most people to say, like, hey, I don't know this thing.
Yeah.
Can you help me?
And a level of maturity.
Yes.
In the athlete, you know, like taking responsibility for your own development, you know.
Yeah, you
have to, like just be mature enough to do these things, because people do get complacent and they're like, it's fine, it'll work itself out, and then it doesn't, and then you look back and you're like, oh, you know. So yeah, that's kind of something that comes to mind, and I'm happy that we're like kind of using like all of these popular buzzwords like mental toughness and like victim mentality, because like, you know, it was a lot, like I feel like these words started kind of coming to the forefront, like I want to say like right before COVID-ish, and like the start of COVID, and they kind of just have been like just dropped all the time. But like you know,
what does that
I think they're
mean?
important things to talk about. Like what even is mental toughness? Like is being mentally tough like not showing emotion and just like you said, grin and bear it, bootstrap it? It is that I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that out myself too. Sometimes I'm like, no, like, you know, whatever.
I think it is.
Shift your mindset, like, but yeah,
it's not, right? Like it's and I
yeah.
think we live in a world where people want it to be black and white, where it's just not, right? Like there are times, right, where I can show mental toughness because I'm like, I really don't want to do this thing. I have no motivation for this thing, but I'm going to rely on my consistency and my dedication to go and do the thing, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it is. That is being mentally tough, right? Holding yourself accountable, mental toughness. Having certain emotions or a lot of heightened overwhelm or anxiety or frustration and just ignoring it, that's not being mentally tough. You're just causing yourself more problems, right?
Yeah.
Like, so, but I think what happens in the old school kind of athletic world was just like, you got to have mental toughness, you got to have grit, and then we never taught athletes actually how to do that, right? The approach was, well, just shut up and do what I'm telling you to do, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I had coaches like that were just like, just do it. And I'd be like, I don't know what's happening, but okay, I'll just do it. Like, and then you leave, and then I don't know how to handle that situation in a game because I didn't have a chance to process whatever that was, or that emotion, or that anxiety comes up, and then we wonder why kids are afraid of making mistakes or, feeling or showing emotion because they've been told that they have to be mentally tough. And that looks like a blank slate, right? Or really stoic. And I just think that that's setting people up for failure. Yeah.
Oh, and that's why this exists, and that's why I'm, obviously grateful for you to come on and talk about this stuff. And, I've learned a lot about myself now coaching full time and seeing kids and working with the kids and seeing a lot of myself in them. And, I'm still learning a ton. And I'm just grateful because I learn. It makes me a better coach to have you on and have this conversation and talk about like some of the uncomfortable stuff that like I feel like I should know, but maybe I don't. And like,
well, you don't know what you don't know. Right?
Yeah,
like, I think
exactly.
That's the biggest thing too is like you don't know what you don't know. And that's how I felt as an athlete myself. Like I look back and I'm like, what the heck was I doing? Like why was I so in my head about this, that, or whatever? And it's just like at the time that felt like the right thing to do, or like the right thing to focus on, and you don't know what you don't know. And that perspective shift that's what I really aim for with athletes. Like, it looks different athlete to athlete. Like, I do have activities and different skills that I teach and all of these things, but like the reality is that this is why this work is so powerful, because you do it with somebody else, right? Like, you're learning you get the perspective, like what you're saying. Like, now that you're a coach, your perspective's so different than when you were the kid on the ice, right? Like, and you can see these things kind of happening for these kids, good, bad, or indifferent, right? And you're like, oh, I remember being in their shoes. I remember what that felt like. And now I can see it from like almost this bird's eye view, and the perspective is what we want people to get. You can't have mental toughness, you can't have vulnerability in isolation. It doesn't work like that. Like, our brains are so stuck on a certain narrative that we need other people to be like, no, this is what's really going on, or this is what I see, to give you different perspective.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. And that's why this exists. That's why I'm, doing this. And that's to help, parents who are listening, that help with giving their kid a different perspective. A kid that's listening to, now he maybe hears this and hears you talk and gains a couple tools that he can do today, and gains a different perspective shift, and maybe gains the courage to ask his coach why he's not playing and what he can do to make that better. So, I'm appreciative of you coming on and doing this, and I want to go into that.
Attached for the show notes, like, I can give you a sphere of control activity that any athlete can use.
That'd be sweet. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
It's a good place to start with a lot of these things. So I'll add that to the show notes for sure.
Great. Yeah, thank you. That's huge. So I have a question here that was submitted, and it was regarding control. And so, how can I do a better job at controlling my thoughts or mentality when I start to get into a rough patch in my sport, a bad hitting slump for myself in baseball, and prevent myself from making the situation worse than it is / needs to be?
Okay.
And that was submitted by a college baseball player.
Okay. Will you read it to me one more time?
Yes. How can I do a better job at controlling my thoughts or mentality when I start to get into a rough patch in my sport, a bad hitting slump for myself in baseball, and prevent myself from making the situation worse than it is / needs to be? Okay.
My initial thoughts are, 1, a self-talk related activity, and then 2 is bringing it, again, we're like bringing this sphere of control. So when it comes to controlling thoughts, negative thoughts, spiraling, whatever that might be, that to me requires you to understand that what you look for, you will find, right? So if your thoughts are filled with self-doubt, or I'm in a slump, or, I'm not executing, I'm bad, I suck, whatever, I'm failing. Your brain is constantly looking, it operates on confirmation bias. So you have to understand that whatever reality you create for yourself up here in your head, your brain will look and cherry pick out evidence that proves that reality true. So if your thoughts are full of self-doubt, or I'm making a lot of mistakes, your brain will find those things and reinforce that mentality, which then makes it worse, right? Like a hitting slump. That's how slumps happen. We start to see all the ways in which we're messing up, and then when we focus on mistakes, we make more mistakes. So you have to understand that. The opposite is also true. If I think things that are more based in self-belief and kind of that growth mindset of like, all right, that wasn't a great game, let me sit down and think of, what exactly went wrong, right? Then I will find those things too, which will reinforce that mindset. So the first thing you can do from like a self-talk related lens is, we want to create the automatic pathways in your brain to lean more positive, to lean more full of belief. And to do that, we have to consistently be thinking those things about ourselves. So one activity I really like for athletes, especially ones that are caught in kind of a negative self-talk cycle, is to start practicing them consistently. And one of the easiest ways you can do that is come up with 2 to 3 affirmations, they don't have to be long, about yourself as an athlete that you can think of. So for this particular question, they're a baseball player, so making them related to the type of player you are, right? I can consistently get RBIs or whatever it is, right? Like, make it about what your role is, your sport, something and positive. Or I'm a confident player. Like, that's a good blanket one, right? I trust in my abilities, whatever it is. 2 or 3, cycle through them, but every time you walk through a doorway, you say one to yourself. You walk through a lot of doorways every day, right? Mm-hmm. It's a good visual trigger for you to say that positive thing to ourselves, because the more you say the positive thing, the more you believe the positive thing. But what happens is when you're in a slump, and I think just people in general tend to lean really pretty negative, right? Mm-hmm. That's how we spiral so quickly. We make one mistake in practice, or we can't quite get a drill one day, and so next thing I know is I suck and I should probably just quit. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, we want to stop that spiral, and the way we stop that is to build that belief and have that be more automatic than the negative pathway. Our brain looks for the path of least resistance, and if what we've reinforced to it is this self-doubt, that's where it will constantly go.
Okay.
So that's one self-talk thing that you can start to implement. And then in terms of, like, if you are in a slump or you've had a couple days where it's been rough, or a couple weeks where it's been rough, I always say, like, look to the why. There's a reason something's going on, right? Like, look to, like, what does your sleep look like? What is your pre-practice routine looking right? Are you physically and mentally prepared for practice? Are you physically, mentally prepared for games? Start to ask the why versus just the judgment of, like, that was bad and it keeps being bad. Why is it bad? Right? Like, there's got to be a reason. Right? A great example of this is, again, Kobe, because I love him. His first season in the NBA, right? They get to the playoffs, and he threw up, like, I don't know, handful, like 5 air balls in the playoffs. And he was like, that would take an athlete out, right? You throw up air balls on national TV in front of thousands of fans, like, not
5
just
times.
one, but 5 times.
Yeah.
Right? So he was like, what is going on, right? Like, a lot of athletes would take that and be like, I can't hack it in the NBA. Like, that, they would go down that negative spiral. His approach was like, why? Why is this happening? And then he started to look. He looked at the game footage and he was like, all the shots are online. I just didn't have the legs. I didn't have the physical strength. And he's like, well, why is that? Well, high school seasons are like 30 games, right? NBA seasons are like 3 times that. So by the time he got to the end of the season, he didn't have the legs because he didn't have the conditioning. He had changed environments, right? So he looked at the why. Why is this happening? Changed his routine over the summer to come into the next season. So instead of shutting down of, I'm making mistakes and this is going horribly, why is it going horribly? Right? And again, this is where you tap your coaches, right? Like, are you noticing anything different about, like, my positioning of my hands on the bat, right? Like, my stance, like, what are you seeing? Why am I having such a hard time? Mm-hmm. And elite athletes, like, when you get to, like, juniors in hockey or college level or a pro, like, you can feel when things are wrong. Like, I remember this, like, ball left my foot in soccer and be like, oh, that was awful. That is not going to go anywhere close to where I want it to go.
Yep.
Like, you know it feels wrong. Mm-hmm. So it's just kind of being a little bit more curious as to why versus going down the spiral of, it's horrible, it's bad, it's just going to keep being bad.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
No, 100% it does. Yeah, and a lot of that comes through reps, just getting a lot of reps, and, like, isolated movements too. Yep. Like, I don't know, I'll give a hockey example, but, like, I think a lot of it, you think you have to do a rep for, like, 30 seconds or 15 seconds, like a super long rep and, like, this big movement or whatever it is, and it's just like, no, just pick up a puck and just work on taking a couple steps, shooting in stride. Just, like, feel it. It's not like start from like a breakout, catch a pass, like you need like a buddy there, and then you got to skate up,
Don't
tight turn, and then shoot in stride if like you're trying to work. Like no, it's just you need to get more pucks through. Start standing still, pull a puck, change the angle, snap it. Then if you have a buddy, ask him, just take a couple strides in from the blue line, get a pass, no stick handle, quick push, or change the angle and shoot. And just like it's a 5-second rep.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think it's just isolating that movement and feeling it. And, if like a slump is what you're in, you can't score goals or you aren't hitting the ball,
right.
Like just do BP. Just get swings. And like, I think visualization is big too.
Oh my God,
right?
I was just going to say that is absolutely a skill you should tap. Everybody should be using that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so funny. I saw something with in baseball too. We can relate it to that. I don't know. It was kind of circulating the internet for a while about one of the the announcers in the MLB was talking about how he used to like visualize every single day him making contact with the ball. And there was another instance that came up too of another baseball player talking about it. But I don't know if you want to dive into the visualization side, because I've heard that from a lot of other athletes that have played at the highest levels too. And I think that's something that a lot of kids don't do. A lot of people don't do in general. Yeah.
It's helpful for everyone, but every athlete, I don't care how old you are, what level you play, like if you want to improve your skills, you should be visualizing. Because what the research has shown us is that when you visualize yourself executing a skill, it actually helps to reinforce those neural pathways as you would physically executing the skill, which helps with muscle memory, which helps with confidence. So you can literally, like, hockey is a great example, right? Not everybody has access to ice all the time, right? Mm-hmm. But you can use visualization to get in those reps. The exact drills that you would do to isolate a specific skill physically, you can visualize that. You're gonna get reps in, and it makes that execution when you actually go out and physically do it that much sharper. Yep. So when you visualize, there's a couple key elements that I always point athletes to. So you have to connect all your senses. So when you visualize, like I tell all my athletes, do this right before bed. You're laying, you're calm, you're in a good place. Take 5 to 10 minutes before you're going to sleep to visualize some of your skills you're working on, right? Like if you're trying to retweak your shot technique or whatever it might be, right? So set yourself up with all your senses. So picture yourself on the ice, on the field, wherever it is, your equipment in your hand. What does it feel like, right? Like what does that actual sensation feel like to have your feet in your skates or the bat in your hand? Like what is your body positioning? Okay, if I tweak it this way, what does that do, right? Like walk through those mechanics and connect it. What does it smell like, right? Hockey is one of those ones. It's easy to think about what it smells like. Stinky.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
very
what
much
does it
so.
Sound like? What does it sound like smell like? What does it sound like, right? Like, and then what you want to do is you want to run through and you want to do perfect reps, right? Like in your mind, everything is the way is controllable. So control all those things. Do a perfect rep, right? And then I want you to connect it to emotion. So when you do it successfully, right, you watch it to completion, whether it's the ball off your bat, like where does it land in the field? For hockey, like where is it hitting the net, right? Like all of those things. Watch it to completion, the visualization for each rep. And then what does it feel like? Like how do you feel when you kill it, right? Like what does it feel like? Connect that emotion to that action, so then you go out and you execute, and you're also feeling that when you step on the ice or the field or the court or whatever it might be.
Yep.
And visualization, all of these skills, I will say this till I'm blue in the face, but consistency, right? Like you have to do these things consistently. That's why the doorway thing works, because you have a visual reminder to say, oh, I just walked through a doorway. Say something positive, about myself as an athlete, right? You have to do it consistently. What I see all the time is I have athletes that are like, well, I tried that once and it didn't work. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm not surprised by that. This is my surprise face. Like, you have to do it consistently. You have to create a routine around it. And it's not a one size, well, visualization, I will say, is a one size fits all. But not all these skills are great for everybody. You have to find the things that work for you, right? You got to try a few on for size. You got to do them to fidelity. Do them for a week or 2 weeks and see, do I feel better doing this or not, right? Like, that's a big part of it, is you have to do it consistently.
Every day, really. I mean,
really every day. Like, if you're taking this seriously and you want to incorporate these skills, they require you to do them daily. But it's not a lot. Like, how much time do you spend on your phone scrolling social media, right? Like, there are sacrifices you have to make if you want to get where you want to go.
Yep. Correct.
And that's really kind of a hard truth for a lot of athletes too.
It is. But the more you're able to dig deep and look internally and realize that that's the truth, the better off you'll be. So,
Absolutely.
Well, this was awesome.
Great.
I really do appreciate it. I know this is going to be very valuable information for a lot of people who are going to be listening, because I learned a ton. So, I love this stuff, and
Me too.
I think it's game changing, and I think it really helps. So, I'm again super grateful to have you on and share your knowledge and dive into this stuff. So,
having me,
people
who are open to this kind of talk and work is getting more and more, approachable. But I think there's people that are still holding out on the effectiveness of this work. But I appreciate you being so bought in.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for your time, and we'll have you on again soon.
Perfect. Sweet.
All right. Let me see how I don't know how to end session.